Perez has resigned. And is there anybody else?
Dennis Garcia.
And Commissioner Garcia is absent as well. So Commissioner Lucero and Commissioner Garcia are absent, but we still have a quorum with 4 members of the Planning and Zoning Commission here.
Stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Jarvis, you seem ready first. Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'll remember it. That's because we lost soccer game to Belgium. That's why.
Okay, on to the agenda. I have a suggested change. If you refer to matters from the Planning and Zoning Commission, sketch review of the proposed PUD. We were off the record earlier. We were talking about that's Mr. Yarvitz's a proposed plan that he might be doing, but we're not. We're going to be reviewing this as an actual review of that plan view development. However, I think it would be appropriate to pitch what his application process is and what he's doing as a review as we go forward for our public hearings 7A, B, C, and D, because we could clarify and understand what the process is now versus what it will be with some of the changes that the planning department has made. So my suggestion is that we handle 8A first prior to 7A. 9A.
9A.
I apologize. 9A, and move that to right below 6.
I second that. Was that a motion?
Is that a motion? Can I motion, please?
You can
Motion to
motion.
approve the agenda as amended.
We have a second.
Second.
All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. All right. So, May 7th minutes, we didn't have any minutes, did we? Or was that June? I apologize.
So we didn't have the meeting in June, but this is from the meeting, the May meeting.
Okay. Does anybody have any changes, additions to the May 7th meeting minutes?
I wasn't at that meeting, so I'll refrain from making a motion for approving those.
Okay.
Move to approve.
Move to approve by Mr. Lukes.
I'll second.
Second, Commissioner Romero. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Let's move on. Citizens Forum. We're going to skip that. There's nobody in the audience for the record, so we don't need to go through that process. So let's go ahead and move on to item 9A, which is the sketch review of the proposed PUD at 441 La Costa Road. Ms. Perkins, do you want to summarize what we're doing here, and then Mr. Yarvitz, do you want to speak?
Yes, Mr. Yarvitz had, as an applicant, had a proposed rezoning for this parcel several months back, and the commission basically suggested that he go about it in a different way to try and keep the existing zoning, but maybe look at a planned unit development, a PUD, as an alternative, so that he could do some clustering of houses and then preserve the open space and make sure that he preserved the acequias and the wetlands that are adjacent and part of that parcel. And so he came back and has been looking at several different options for using a PUD, and this is one of them. And he thought that it would be nice to discuss this with the commission, since the commission had suggested this earlier, as is this how you actually put into effect a PUD under our current code? So again, this is just an example. This is not his application.
Mr. Yarvitz?
Again, what I'm looking for here is this the right way to go about the process of the PUD? This particular one is maximizing everything in the code And so I wanted to discuss with you pros, cons, things you liked, didn't like. Want to make sure that I can, before I put in the formal application for a public hearing, go through all this. So what this is, R4, PUD, maximized open space, density bonus, cluster housing. And it's also a subdivision. So given what we're looking at here, you can see on the last page, you can see the calculations first. Do you all have that on the site plan? You must have it in the back somewhere. Yeah.
Part of the package?
It's at the very, very end of
Very
your
end.
package
It's
in
the two
color.
last pages of the application.
Oh, okay. Oh,
I'd like to show you what we came up with. And so given the acreage, 4.833, we took the acreage and calculated a 70% open space to get a 70% density bonus as per code. We came up with the 8 fourplexes. As you can see in the picture, it's worth 1,000 words. There's parking, there's 8 fourplexes, each will be on its own lot. And let me just preface this of why I want to, this is originally supposed to be just an apartment complex, but one of the vehicles that's allowed to a developer is under the standardized HUD code as an exit strategy. Let me back up. A typical exit strategy in an apartment complex is sell the whole thing or turn it into condos. And in this case, what we're allowed to do is, under the HUD code, you can sell a fourplex as a single family 1 through 4 units to an individual owner occupied. Okay? A conventional mortgage, owner occupied, is 1 through 4 units. So as an exit strategy, the developer could sell these one at a time if this wasn't a subdivision, in addition to everything else. All of the open space, the easements would all be cross-referenced and legalized, and contributions for maintenance fees, all of that will be done. But each of these lots could be sold individually to a single person with the additional income from the 3 units calculated with their income to buy one of these projects. It's a great way to go as an investment vehicle. It's a great way to have a family compound, which lately I've been dealing a lot with families wanting to live in the same areas. And so I wanted to make the subdivision as part of this so that the exit strategy, if desired, could go that route. So the calculations are all there. If you want to review any of those, we've taken the 4.83, multiplied it by the numbers. I think you double-checked on my numbers, Martha, I hope?
Yes.
Okay, so that the 70% open space, 70% density of 4 is 2.8, so you get 6.8 units per acre, times the acreage on the open space. So this requires multiple approvals, and even the application process, I think, would all go in, correct me if I'm wrong, one full application for this, it would be I think would all go in. Because each of the parcels, the open space is behind the house or in front of the house, depending on where the front door is, but no one has to cross, none of the kids have to cross any parking areas to get to the open space. The open space will have trails and some kind of landscaping design and xeriscaping, and we want to the wetlands area that you can see on the north or left of the property will be cleaned up. There's a bunch of debris in there that was dumped 15 years ago. So that will be cleaned up and returned to a normal natural flow with trails. The acequia itself that's on the property is on the far right border of the property. It's only about half of that distance. We've made sure to leave that alone with enough easement to get to it. And I think we've parked more than is required. I double-checked on that. And let me open it up for some questions. I think it's a lot in a mouthful, and
Well, to clarify, just for what we're talking about not reviewing your actual case.
right.
We're talking about what you go through right now as far as the PUD application
Well,
process.
one, it's an application that I don't think has ever been done before here in town. It's a PUD, a cluster housing, open space, density bonus, PUD subdivision. And I can't recall if there was ever one done here in Taos. I've done a PUD subdivision before, but we didn't do any maximum open space or any density bonuses.
Valverde Commons did all those things.
Did they do all those things?
They did density bonus as well?
Did they? I haven't reviewed their case. I've tried to stay away from that. So, similar to what they did, Doug, if you have any, Commissioner Patterson, would you throw some stuff at me that, good, bad? I would love just some frank feedback on this.
I think we're going after what the process is, right?
Yes, including the
Okay.
process.
Well,
So
okay.
I would ask Ms. Perkins to say, from this point on, what's the process for this application?
So I think what he's talking about is actually going before you with a PUD along with the subdivision application.
Yes,
And a PUD requires you to keep the base zoning. So the base zoning here is
R4.
R4, so that's 4 units per acre. So overall, you can only have 4 units per acre. What I'm unsure of is when he's starting to break these into fourplexes and actually selling the land underneath as a subdivision. That's the part that I'm not clear on whether or not the code actually allows.
What if they are condominiums?
If there are
No.
condos, there would not be an issue.
no, not going there. I'd rather fall on my sword.
Also, what do you need for U.S. Army Corps of Engineers 404 permit for cleaning up the wetlands?
We've already done a lot of work with FEMA, working with the wetlands, with the floodplain, with the elevation, with what's going on there. We have all the calculations. It was mostly done to determine how far the floodplain would go and how we could clean it up. It's really just a lot of garbage in there. We're not redirecting or moving the water flow at all, but we want to clean it up and make it a useful walking area. I don't believe we need to deal with the Army Corps to clean up a mess.
Yeah, I don't want to complicate your life, but anytime any dredging or filling in what's shown as wetlands does fall under the
Yeah,
jurisdiction
we're
of
not dredging
Army.
or filling.
I think to touch that waterway, you either have to contact the Army Corps of Engineers and advocate clearance from them not to file a permit or.
Yeah,
Okay, we'll
Yeah.
follow that. That's good. That's number one. We
because
started
you
with-
don't want to get caught
No,
later in the
that-
process.
That's a great point. We started with FEMA to determine what the reality of what that was. Was that a river? Was that a floodplain? What is going on there? And we have all that surveyed in, and with the elevations on our previous design, we had looked at extending the building lots to cover the whole property and wanted to know where the floodplain was and if we were going to raise that elevation along the banks to keep out of the floodplain. But we decided to stay away from it, eliminate that issue, and clean it up and making it just a natural open space area. But we will contact the Army Corps. That's a good point.
Yeah, they can just sign off on it and
Or
you're
they can-
done.
They can tell us that we don't have to do anything. But
Right,
Please
right.
get their approval in writing. Got it.
Yeah.
So Commissioner Lee, just to keep us on track, we're trying to,
Yep. So I guess to go back to the PUD, I don't want to put anybody on the spot right now, but how does the density bonus concept relate to the number of houses you can put in a certain place in an R4 zone?
Well, it
and a
allows you to
PUD?
put more units given additional open space. So,
Same percentage applies.
right, so actually in the code it defines in increments of 10%. So he can put in more units with more open space. So that's sort of begging the question here. When he's talking about subdividing the land, the area that's open space has to be held in common for all those fourplexes. So they're going to have to form some sort of
Yeah.
homeowners association or something like that with
Of course.
CCRs that make sure that the open space goes with those units, is the way
Yes, that's correct.
I'm interpreting this.
That's correct.
Mm.
Easement agreements and open space agreements and maintenance agreements, and nothing can be changed or divided or taken out of the open space.
So does each unit, is it considered one occupied living space for the purposes of an R4? Like 4 places per acre, there's 4 structures in an acre? Does that make
No,
sense? How is
Right.
that? Is that how that's calculated?
Right, right.
Okay. And then because of the density bonus, because they're all in a cluster, they
Right.
can actually put more per structure? I mean, I
No,
don't.
just for the land.
Just for
The amount of land, there's 70% extra open space, you get 70% bonus. R4, like Mark said, R4, 70% of 4 per acre is 2.8, so now it's, for all practical purposes, it's zoning R 6.8.
Because you have a
70%.
70% bonus on
On the
4?
open space. No, for the entire
For
acreage.
4 units per acre, you have a 70% bonus.
Got it.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And therefore, you can have 16 units per acre?
32.
32.
No, per acre.
But
No,
for
no.
the whole parcel.
For the
It's
12.
4.83 acres, times 4 would be 19.2 units. But when you
Okay.
take 70% of your land and put it into open space, you take 19.2 times the 70% and add that on top of the 19 to get the 32.
Okay.
So 70% of 20 is 14, so we're adding 13 units to the 19 units to get to the 32, which is what's allowed under the code. Now, if this was just an apartment complex without a subdivision, it's much less complicated. And if I have to remove the subdivision application part of it because it doesn't make sense, which is really what I'm here to understand, we can probably do that. But right now, so each of these lots, you can see the lot size. It's roughly, 16, maybe it's a half acre, not even. It's a
Okay.
half acre lot. There'll be 16 half acre lots. I'm sorry, 8 half acre lots
Right?
in the subdivision. Each lot, but the total density on the project is allowed at 32, regardless if it's a subdivision or not.
And Ms. Perkins, under the new changes, are there going to be any changes to the formula at all?
No, I'm not proposing any. What I was trying to do is keep with the general concepts that are already in the code. I was just trying to clean up a lot of the language and the references. So I'm really not changing the content so much.
So for the purposes of Mr. Yarvitz's discussion here, what kind of things is he going to have to do differently with you in order to get his application in properly based on the changes that you made?
Like I said, basically, all I'm doing is trying to simplify the code. I'm not really changing the content. I'm just trying to make it easier so that, for example, the code separates out site plan approval depending on each type of planning application that you submit. So why not just have a general site plan requirement and then refer to that site plan every time you need it for each type of application?
Right.
And for example, like a rezoning is actually a text amendment. It's changing the code or the zoning map, which is part of our adopted code. And so there was criteria under the amendments to the code, as well as in the rezoning section for the application, there was also criteria. So, I mean, I saw a lot of that where there was more than one place where there was requirements that didn't quite jive with each other, which makes it awfully confusing for staff and the applicant. So that's what I was trying to change. I was not trying to make any substantial changes as far as content.
Mr. Yarvitz, have you reviewed the changes at all?
I've looked at some of them, yes, not thoroughly.
Do you have any concerns about, as it affects your ability to go forward with
No,
this particular application?
no.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, Commissioner Lukes.
I think this is a creative way to develop this piece of land. and I think it's perfect for the marketplace. I think that will be a successful project. Do you see, from staff point of view, any red flags with the application as it's presented? And each element of it, the subdivision, the bonus, density bonus,
Well, this will have to be run through
and then
the,
fee simple transfers of each fourplex with all the appurtenances, which means the the share of the open space and easements and whatnot.
right. I have actually seen this done before. But the Development Review Committee is the first step in an application process, and they have not reviewed it. So, I mean, just looking at it, what kind of begs for attention is for a hammerhead or something for the fire department so that they can turn around.
Yeah.
I mean, there's little stuff like that, but I think he's looking at the overall concept, and I have seen it work doing what he's doing.
So the mechanism is there to make it work, provided that each department has its say in it.
I believe so. The town attorney, I have not talked to him about this, and I'm
Don't.
not sure that he's had a chance to review it.
The biggest issue, if I may jump in here, is that the minimum lot size is what we're really throwing out the window. In an R4, the minimum lot size is a 1/4 acre. Here you've got 4 units on a little more than a 1/4 acre. So in the PUD, you're allowed to do that, if I'm not mistaken. You're
Yeah, that's
allowed
part
to-
of the PUD
part of
that
the
you can
PUD is-
alter.
Is to alter the lot
Right.
size, as long as you're not messing up with the underlying density, which also includes a density bonus. That's why it's a little more complicated. But otherwise, you're allowed to change the underlying lot size.
No, I
To me,
think-
that was the biggest red flag in myself when I'm looking at this, that here is roughly, you know, 1/3 or 1/2 an acre for a 4-plex. And the current zone, or is this considered multifamily now, and is that a problem with the application? That's kind of where I'm also looking in that, if,
Anything over 2 units together is a multifamily building.
in town? Because I know we're changing that in the county.
IBC,
What?
The International Building Code and the Town Building Code. So you've got a single-family home, a duplex,
Right?
and then you're in multifamily.
So what will I need to do, or what are the issues with that surround? Is there a different set of code I have to follow, other than the building code?
I don't know.
I
Well,
don't think
it
so.
becomes a commercial building when you go to 4-plex.
So the sprinklers and such?
I can't speak for the fire marshal, because this has not been through the Development Review Committee.
Under HUD definition and federal definitions, 1 through 4 is still considered single family.
According to building codes and the land use development code, anything over a duplex is multifamily.
Right, so will that create an issue here with what I'm trying to do? I guess that's the right question, thank you.
But it may not be an issue, it might be just as far as building code, where you would be required to put sprinklers because it will be considered commercial. And some other duck in probably.
Even that level of residential will require a sprinkler. But that's no big deal.
No, we're okay to sprinkle. Sprinkling a new construction is a lot better than trying to retrofit. That's not an issue.
Okay.
We'd probably sprinkle it because the fire insurance will justify sprinklers now. I've looked at the
I don't know
numbers.
the details of the ins and outs of this application, and I think we're kind of getting beyond the discussion of the path forward for it. I think it's a great concept, I think it's a great use for that land.
Okay, I'm basically here for some general feedback, because I would like to get the application going forward. I'd like to,
General feedback is it looks good.
I'd like to shake out any red flags that are
Yeah,
brought up that I
that's
have
the way
to
I
do
feel.
something. So,
I think you're only going to discover the red flags in the details.
okay. Conceptually, though, it works.
Yeah, I think I mean, you already heard two of us speaking favorably
Okay.
of it, that we like to see that kind of creative development in town.
Okay.
It
I
just-
would- Again, there's no affordable housing here. It's all market rates, or, lesser. I mean, we need market rate apartments if you're not familiar with the market, but, okay. I would like to.
Press on.
I'd like to sit and listen to the rest of your PUD changes to make sure I don't have any issues as I review some of that again.
Absolutely not.
Thank you very much.
All right, so let's move on to item 7A. Thank you, Mr. Yarvitz. 7A, ordinance number 2014-05, zoning map update and approval. Ms. Perkins or Ms. Rincon? Who's addressing?
So we were hoping that we'd have the updated zoning map for you tonight. We actually don't have control of the geographic database. That's a GIS staff member that's in Public Works Utilities. And he's been out trying to map the utility system. So we are unable to get his assistance in time for this meeting. I was really hoping that we would. We do have like a proposal to use the map that's sitting there just as far as the crumpled up paper. Using that map, Amy can go through and show you what we're planning to change most likely on that map so that we have a zoning map that's ready to adopt, but we don't actually have a zoning map. The other thing that the code requires is that the zoning map show the PUDs on the same map. And we're, as new staff, we really would like to know where the PUDs are. And on the adopted zoning map that was done in 2006, they actually have kind of like the historic overlay zone. They have laying on top like a pattern. The pattern's really, really hard to see. So what we're thinking is that it needs to be the zoning and then another map showing the overlays. And then also one thing with the PUD is because it is an overlay, and the way the code reads, if a PUD is applied for and it's granted, but if there's no action taken within a year, then that PUD is gone and it just reverts back to the regular zone. So on the zoning map, there actually is one parcel that I know is being advertised as a PUD, but that PUD status has actually been removed. So that's one of the tricks with it. But if staff knew where those PUDs are, then we can go pull the final plats. And then we know, like where the cluster housing is allowed and kind of some of these oddball things that we were just talking about with the last what if. So anyway, it's up to you. If you would like Amy to go through and show you.
Is there a way, Ms. Perkins, for you to describe some of the changes and then we could approve the changes that you intend on putting on the actual physical map, even though you don't have the map done yet?
That's a question for the town attorney.
Do you understand that question, Mr. Caldwell?
I do, Mr. Chairman. I don't think that that would be feasible unless the description, the verbal description of the changes could be accurate enough that any reasonable person would get an actual picture of what the map would look like as a result. And that just doesn't seem practical to me. Now, I think that we could get quite a ways down the road tonight by giving you a summary description and bringing the actual map back to you in the context of a continuation of the agenda item so as not to have to go through the re-notification process.
I see. So I guess it's up to you, Ms. Perkins. Would you rather start going through some of the changes now, or would you rather wait till the next meeting, go through everything, and have us approve it all at once?
Go through some of the basics.
Amy's willing to go through some of the basics.
Okay.
So, for the cameras, can I move them?
Do you want us to move the maps?
I mean, I think we're all familiar with the map, so.
Okay. So,
And you're not going to be able to show us each individually anyways.
some of the big changes that we're looking at, this PUD needs to be.
Is that Valle Verde?
Yes. And so then we have this area here, we're going to be, on the 2006 map, which would be this one right here, it shows it as an R4 zoning, so we're going to take this back to R4. And then,
Los Pandos has a PUD.
Which is going to be an overlay.
yeah, it would be an overlay.
Okay.
So it's going to be a separate map on top of everything. And that's also going to be separate too, because the hashing for the HOZ makes it really difficult to actually read the roads. And so we were thinking if we have that overlay, then it'll be easier to distinguish everything that's going on in the area. A couple of the other, we've had some rezonings this year, so like in this area, we're going to have the map updated with the rezonings that have gone through. And that's most of the big changes that are going to go on through the map are just rezonings that have happened from 2006.
Is that light cream color, is that in Pueblo land, and the light green is forest?
light green, it's forest, and then this beige is actually public.
Okay.
And then we would have on the map there's a different map that we have that kind of has the county in gray, so that it's kind of easy to distinguish that some of these annexations are currently unzoned, but are still part of the town.
What about the
And-
ETZ?
There's no ETZ.
There's no-
Gone?
Gone.
Is that,
So it's
It's
on
not
this
on
map,
there.
but it wouldn't be on this map.
got it.
And then where the green arrows are is kind of those areas that are kind of where the changes will be. And then we also discussed going ahead and adopting the zoning for some of the annexed land that was already zoned in the adoption of the 2006 map, going ahead and just adopting with the new zoning map, the same zoning for the annexed parcels or pieces that were added in, because there was some question whether or not they were part of the town or not before they are part of the ETZ and got a zone. Then we're thinking that the neighborhood already thinks that they're zoned that zone, and so to make it simpler, so we don't have to zone so many annexed pieces, to go ahead and just keep the existing zoning on the proposed zone map.
Okay.
How far over does it start, Mr. Coe?
Its boundary ends over here on Murata Lane.
And
then
Valverde,
Valverde.
the east side of, the east side. Oh, Placid,
To pretty much Rivali, or actually it's a little bit shorter there. So roughly Placitas
Rivoli.
and yeah.
Paseo.
and it's only one side of Valverde, it's only the, yeah,
The east side.
yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Cohn. Okay. I think we can move on to the next agenda item.
I think in order to
So
keep it
we have to-
in the
We gotta,
queue, we have to take some action on it.
you think we need to somebody needs to make a motion to continue this to the next meeting? Okay.
Make a motion to continue to the next
Do
meeting.
we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Okay. All right. Thanks for doing that, Mr. Patterson. All right, let's move on to 7B, item case number PZ 2014-14, which is a text amendment to the separate zoning approval.
To separate.
Just, Jesus Christ. I need a reading. To separate zoning approval from site plan approval. Ms. Perkins.
So this one ended up becoming a little monster.
Because it was never addressed.
When I started to try and take out the, right now, the current code basically wants you to rezone for a specific project. So you need to have a site plan as well as a proposed zone.
That's
And
illegal.
those need to be separated to be legal. So I started writing that and trying to separate out the site plan from the zoning. And then I realized, the whole section kind of needs to be rewritten, because each form of planning application was requiring, like, criteria as number one, and number two, the existing conditions in a site plan, and then what the proposed conditions were as far as a site plan. And it ended up being very, very redundant and going on, and even the certificate of appropriateness was clumped in. So what I tried to do was separate out for each type of zoning application what the criteria is, and then just have one generic site plan. The other thing that kind of complicates this is that a lot of the definitions actually have the criteria for, like, approving a variance or what special use permit is. And then we got special uses, oh, by the way, down at another section of the code. And then we have our performance standards. And so this code is very, very hard to follow. In some cases, you're tromping through the whole code to find out all the pieces to your application. So the proposed changes are by no means really complete. What I did was I ended up taking a pretty big bite out of trying to consolidate what's there and trying to make sense of it without basically rewriting the whole code, which is what I was beginning to feel like I was doing, and Amy will attest to it. She'd look at me and I was like totally out of it. By the way, she did read through it and gave me a few suggestions.
Okay. So do you want to, I guess we want to not go through all the different changes that you made. Do you
Right.
want to kind of point out some of the big pieces in the actual
Mr.
documents?
Chairman, I have a question.
Sure, Commissioner Lukes.
What do you do when somebody wants to rezone, but they have no specific project, so no site plan? So just rezone it for the sake of rezoning?
Well, no, so that's the other thing. If they want to do a rezoning, then we apply the
development style.
the amendment to the text conditions. So we're looking at it like, how does the proposed new zoning fit into the comp plan? Does it match any master plan that might exist? How is it complementary to the neighborhood? Is it spot zoning? That means, is it isolated, or are there parcels around it that are zoned similar, or they have similar type of uses? Those kinds of things.
But that's assuming that it will fit all those criteria.
Right.
But somebody just wants to rezone it because it makes sense to
Okay, so then they rezone it. Then what I'm suggesting with this code change is by separating out the site plan, that the site plan actually go before planning and zoning for approval. Now, one of the questions is, at what point should, like if it's a minimum site plan, like amendment or something like that, should that stay with the code administrator and staff? At what point should it jump to the commission? So I think I wrote here, as far as the application process and the approvals, that ended up being quite long, that if it's a brand-new development, so you need a new site plan, that would go before the Planning and Zoning Commission. If it were an amendment to existing site plan, then it would be up to the code administrator to decide. But I actually would like you guys to review that. That's a great question, because I was hoping that would come up. So I don't know if you noticed where I did that. Let me see if I can find this section. It's in that whole application section. It talks about each type of application, and then what the criteria are for each application, and what the review process is for it. Like a PUD goes to the Planning and Zoning Commission and then up to council.
Site plan requirements, 58, 59 on the,
Is it page 58?
I think so for.
Yeah, so it's page 58.
58. That was already there anyway.
And then the other section to look at is on page 40, which is 16.12.040.5. That's the application procedure. And if you go down through it, you'll see an awful lot of redlining at the very, very end. And that's trying to break out each one of those planning application types and what the approval process is. And at some point, this area could be cleaned up, but since this is sort of the existing format, I tried to keep it in that existing format and put the criteria in, and then the site plan reference.
Just a quick change that I saw, Martha.
Okay.
Ms. Perkins, was the page 44. It looked like section N just kind of you didn't quite finish it. I don't know, maybe I'm,
Okay.
you see that?
Yeah, and I changed that. I mean, I saw that, and I actually finished that paragraph.
Uh-huh.
And so now I'm wondering why it's missing again.
That was the only big thing that I saw.
Okay, because I remember changing that.
Okay, I'm going to turn it over to the commission here. Do the commissioners have any questions thoughts, ideas about what Ms. Perkins has said so far?
Well, for one, I would like to read through the materials and just continue this to the next meeting, and I'll be better informed anyway.
Has this been reviewed? Or do you want to, what steps do you want to take towards final approval of this?
Well, I was hoping that you could at least review it to some extent, especially as far as that 16.12.04.5, the application procedure, which the Chairman Lee actually found one area where text had been dropped out, which really, I typed up that portion again. I don't remember any other changes after that, so I think we're okay with this version. Because that gets pretty gnarly in there, and I don't know how clear it is.
I had a question on page 50, Ms. Perkins. It had to do with the 16.12.70.3, construction of commercial buildings. Are you?
Yes.
So it changed from 6 or more dwellings. Large-scale residential uses are defined as, it was 6 or more dwellings at one point, and then it changed from that to 2, to more than 2. That seemed like a significant change to me, but I don't know. Why was that changed?
That was significant change, mainly because of the building code. The building code is now classifying commercial as more than 2 units, which I believe Commissioner Patterson just brought up with the last.
So that's the
first
IBC
case.
thing that you're talking about?
All right, so there's 2 commercial codes. One is the IRC, the International Residential Code,
Yeah.
and that applies to basically single-family homes or a duplex. And then anything above that, you're in the International Building Code. So it just, anything more than a duplex is a multifamily building. Being commercial is always, the use of the term commercial is kind of misleading. There's still residential buildings. You can have an apartment, you can have a condominium, you can have lots of residential uses. It's just that one falls under the IRC and the other falls under the IBC. And I think most code folk refer to the IBC as the commercial building code.
Right.
Because that's where all the commercial buildings are. I don't think, not because it's actually a commercial building code. Is there am I missing something there, Ms. Perkins?
No, you're not, and so.
One's the IRC, one's the IBC. So
Yeah, and this is kind of a last-minute change because I talked to the building official about it. One of the problems that I actually have with this section is in the middle of everything, we suddenly plunk our building stuff in. And so it talked about residential buildings, and then it talks about commercial uses rather than buildings. And so we kept missing that was required for commercial buildings. And then it went to certificates of occupancy. And then there's not good references to the performance standards. So, I'm not quite sure how to handle this definition of commercial building. Because, again, it's requiring, the site plan kind of at a higher level.
I'm going to,
And then the other thing that's kind of weird about here is the time to commence development. I think that's pertaining to just the building. Like, there's this building permit stuff put in the middle, and then we have the construction mitigation checklist. And I took out the actual details of the construction mitigation checklist because I don't think that kind of detail ought to go in the code. But this whole section's a little awkward.
I'm looking at all this, got a question, I don't even know if it's going to be part of this, but as we start going forward and we start seeing a lot of these mobile carts that are coming up, is there a section in here that is going to address those issues? I know there's been some stuff come up with them where people are almost making them permanent structures. I know of one that I was just involved in with the state that got sideways and stuff. Or is that something that's going to be addressed in here to clarify that in the future? Or?
You know what? That's in chapter 5.
It is in chapter 5?
And, yeah, we've been wrestling with that quite a bit. And, man, if you have a good way of writing that code, maybe you should take it up. It's really, really hard, because like you say, these food carts are migrating to the point slowly but surely so that they're a regular commercial business. And so they should require a commercial site plan, which then should trigger probably a traffic study. And so they're slowly like hooking up to the utilities, becoming more and more permanent. And we're having a difficult time with that
Well,
whole
that's-
issue.
We're having that with the gas issues also, is because there's no code that is specific to them. And I was just involved in one down by Sid's the other day where it became who really has jurisdiction over it. You know, is it a building? Is it not? Where does a construction file? I've done the same thing with a couple of others with propane, and it just seems like nobody's been acting on what we're going to do with these things.
Right, and the health department, the state's health department has gone more and more uptight, so they're requiring more and more, which is adding on to these carts to the point that they're almost becoming like real commercial kitchens and then businesses. So you're right, I don't quite know how to deal with that, so I haven't dealt with it.
All right, so I think I'm going to just summarize this real quick, because we could get, speaking of sideways. Oh, you've already spoken today, sir. Sure.
The question I have is the difference between, and Commissioner Patterson brought it up really well, the building code, the IBC, is a different animal than usage. What code you follow and what inspections you get. In other words, the question of residential use and multifamily, whether it's commercial or not, is a separate issue. It has to be built under the IBC, that we understand, following fire sprinkling and all of the rest of that. But does it fall under commercial usages in your code?
According to this, it does.
Right, and now that's the question I'm asking. Should you be assuming that, the IBC is just how do you build it, not the usage or the rest of the project in terms of how it's laid out?
I think what Ms. Perkins pointed out with the change from 6 to 2 is just the level of scrutiny and review a development gets. So this is basically saying that anything that becomes multifamily gets reviewed with the same level of scrutiny as a commercial development.
Right.
I don't think that's necessarily off base.
Okay, I'm just going back to the townhouse concept, which is 1 through 4 units, is still called single family under conventional and other terms. Under the building code, you have to build it under the IBC, but it can still be bought and sold under single family ordinances with mortgages and HUD definitions of what that is.
I don't think any of this
Doesn't affect, okay.
the mechanism by which you
Okay,
buy or sell it.
I just want to make sure I understand that, because it's where I'm confused.
So I think when I asked about what your path to approval for this was, Ms. Perkins, one, I assume that everybody here would like to read it a little bit thoroughly and then come back with some more input. Does legal review and come back with a recommendation as well?
Yes, legal
Okay.
needs to review it.
So maybe
we should have a motion to continue, I think.
We continue it for 1 month, we come back and within month, hopefully have a final approval for this, and then it goes to town council as an ordinance, is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
And we promise to read it.
And I think if you have any changes, you should submit them beforehand to Ms. Perkins so she can incorporate them.
Is there a way we could get an audio version of this?
Yeah, right.
Listen to it on the road or when you go to sleep.
Call Martha on her cell phone.
Would you read it to me, please?
Yeah, I don't know if that'd clarify it much.
So do we have a motion to continue?
You believe you have insomnia?
Second?
Second.
Second from Commissioner Rivera?
Second.
All's in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
All right. I think just going forward, I think that's probably going to happen for the next 2 as well. But let's go ahead and go through them. Ms. Perkins, you want to give another summary kind of the next item
Special
number?
use.
Which is regarding the 2014-15, which is a text amendment to clarify the approval process and requirements for obtaining a special use.
Okay, again, this is another one of these, a special use was defined all over the code. And so what I'm trying to do is just consolidate where it's defined, what the criteria are, all into one place. When I started working on this, though, I realized that there may be some case law that also applies where I need the attorney's office to really review this. I mean, this is not, you know, like a question I can ask. It actually will take some research. So this one's, other than trying to condense what's there in the code and so that you can follow it as an applicant, there are some outstanding questions that I have as far as what special uses are we allowed to regulate.
Ms. Perkins, if I may, and Mr. Caldwell, Commissioner Lee, if I may.
Sure.
Is this something that's realistic for you to get to review this big of assumption, these bite-sized chunks of our land use development code? Is that realistic that Mr. Caldwell will have time to review these and give an opinion in a month's time, or is that something that would be more applicable to like a contract attorney that is specific to land use code?
Commissioner Patterson, that's a good question. You know, I don't think I think it's possible. I don't know the true extent of the questions. I know Ms. Perkins and I have discussed some of the issues that she's encountered, such as, is it appropriate, is it legal to characterize certain uses as special uses that have to jump through all these hoops? I'm fairly comfortable kind of opining on those questions. In terms of my actual literal review of every word of a text amendment in this bulk package, I will be able to give it a cursory review. As to giving it a thorough review, that's going to be tough in the next month, but it's going to be tough in the next 6 months too. You know, if really what we're considering is a complete overhaul to the land use regulations, and my impression is that this is an attempt to not do that at this point. I think if the town wanted to make a policy decision to completely overhaul our land use regulations, then I think you're talking about multiple contract professionals, perhaps in addition to an attorney, some kind of third-party planning professional. And so I don't think we're there. I think that Ms. Perkins and Ms. Rincon have done a good job to do some triage for purposes of this commission and the council going forward, while a new town council establishes a sort of broader policy. And I think my office, whether it's me or my successor or the two of us in combination, can adequately attend to these text amendments in order to present them in the next month.
Very good. Thank you.
So, Ms. Perkins, do you want to continue on? Or were you done?
I believe I'm done. One of my concerns here is under planned unit development on page 31. I have 3 acres or more under planned unit development. I actually toyed with that and then I took it out. So I don't think it's on the previous one. I think it should be out of the previous one. What I was trying to do is any code section that applied to like the special uses, that's also in the site plan rezoning case. I tried to keep the language exactly the same, because if these get like adopted all at the same time, I don't want the codifier to get confused. So that may be one discrepancy that I see. Anyway, I will review that. And then the other thing is, we had talked about that paragraph ending kind of not at the end of the sentence. I'll give you the updated copy. I think we put the wrong version in the commissioner's packet. I think we just picked up the wrong one when we put it in.
So what is the right one supposed to say?
So the right one is, for planned unit development, I'm decided that we don't need to limit it to 3 acres or more, just as long as it's under single ownership or some unified controlling entity. And I put in actually, my addition is putting in the unified controlling entity. Because I know that sometimes you want to do redevelopment, and you want to form like a corporation that will put several pieces together and then do redevelopment all together without having it actually be one owner. It may be a group of owners jointly trying to do some redevelopment, say a big downtown block or something like that. So I wanted to allow that flexibility.
Is that unified controlling entity term, is that a term of art, or is that something that you try to develop yourself, or?
No, actually, I'd like some help on maybe rephrasing that. I don't know what a good name for that is.
Okay.
I think we have to move this also to the next meeting.
Yes.
Does that mean that if it's 3 acres or less, you cannot do a PUD?
No.
It just means that the 3-acre concept is removed altogether.
No, but right now it says,
That's the,
Ms. Perkins said she was gonna remove that.
No, they will be allowed.
okay.
That's what I understood.
were there any other kind of significant questions that you had, Ms. Perkins, about what you were trying to put together on the special use stuff?
No, mainly it's just moving a lot of text around, and it would be really nice to have a couple other eyes review it. It gets pretty complicated after a while.
Very convoluted, huh?
Yeah.
Difficult to track. Okay.
Well, does anybody have any other?
Make a motion to
Sure,
continue?
sure.
Make a motion to, for public hearing 2001-14-15, I'd like to make a motion to continue it to our next regularly scheduled zoning meeting.
Do we have a second on that?
I'll second.
I think Commissioner Lukes beat you, Commissioner Merrill.
He gets the butt.
He'll get the second there.
By a hair.
All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Okay. So let's move on to subsection D, I guess, 2014-16, which is the text amendment to clarify sections of the code for the plan unit development. Ms. Perkins, do you want to summarize any specifics in that particular section? And Mr. Yarvitz, if you want to speak on that, I'm sure you probably have some comments or questions.
Okay, I'm looking right now at the site plan and the proposed development. On page 33, site development plan is updated without that 3 acres in it, and that's what the special use should have read. Basically, this is the same thing. I just broke out the plan unit development separately. It's very similar to the rezoning site plan review process, because in the end, I mean, that's what I kept finding, is that site plan section ended up dealing with just about every single planning application, including plan unit developments. And so for clarification, as far as advertising this legally, I broke out the planned unit developments, because initially when we advertised this, I did not have the planned unit development in there. And I thought it was significant enough that we ought to separate it out.
So are we kind of repeating ourselves then?
Yeah, on this one, I think you are. I think most of this language is in the first.
So do we need to go over it separately again, or is it just the stuff that we discussed in?
I think it's pretty much the stuff that you've discussed.
Okay.
Yeah, I think
So-
it's redundant.
So does it make sense then to just eliminate that as a section and just go over it kind of as part of subsection, as part of the item 7C, or does it make sense to take out the part of item 7C and put that in D separately, which is the PUD? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, I do. I think the only section that's different is the,
Separate ordinance.
is between pages 54 and like 15, like 60. It's all the, and all the way up to 63. The other thing is,
54 to 63?
yeah, those are going to be new, because that's the specifics of a PUD. And one of the things about the planned unit development was that you go through this arduous process of taking it all the way up to the council, and then you come back down and you take it back to the Planning and Zoning Commission. So what I was trying to do with the planned unit development is try and get the conceptual format first, rather than having a detailed site plan, basically trying to take it up a level and give the general idea. You know, I want to cluster this housing here. I want to keep this open space. Is this compatible with the neighborhood? It's kind of like looking at it from a higher perspective. This is kind of the design standards or architectural standards that we're planning on using without actually laying out the whole plan. And then the second go around is the detailed site plan, so that an applicant doesn't spend a lot of money up front to be told, yeah, we hate this. You know, go back to the drawing board. So what I'm trying to do is to make it more conceptual the first time through and then more succinct the second time through. And then the other thing that I found interesting in this code is that amendment to a PUD. Yeah, it didn't look like it was any big deal. It looked like the code administrator, after all this process of getting a PUD approved, could actually approve an amendment pretty easily. And then the final thing is that there wasn't any final plat requirement or a final site plan requirement, which I think needs to be recorded with the county. And so in several of these code changes, I actually said this needs to be recorded at the Taos County clerk's office, because I'm not seeing that. And when Amy and I are looking around for these PUDs, we're looking for the final site plan or the final subdivision plat. And we don't always find that, and that's actually what gets adopted.
Mr. Yarvitz, you hearing that?
Yes, can I recap what I heard to make sure that it's correct? So you can do it, all right. So in a PUD application.
Do you swear to summarize truthfully?
In a PUD, you can conceptually go through the process all the way to town council or just through P&Z?
I was actually going all the way to town council.
So town council would give you a conditional approval of a PUD, which is a zone change, subject to then, once they said, okay, we like what you're doing, then you do the grading and drainage and utility site plan, spend all that money, and if that meets the code, then it's approved. You don't have to go back to town council, correct?
That was what I was thinking, yes. So that you're looking at it from the comprehensive plan level, the master plan level, and looking at how it's going to fit in the neighborhood, and you're doing it at a conceptual level.
Right.
And then the actual nitty-gritty specific site plan details, kind of like with a zoning, is
Right.
done with the commission.
With just the planning commission.
Right.
So town council would approve your PUD conditionally, that yes, these are the variances you're getting in your PUD, all of this site plan, we like it. It's conditional approval. Then you go back to the process with a site plan to P&Z, and if they approve the site plan, then you're good to go.
Right, with all the nitty-gritties.
and
And
of
then we
course,
want a final site plan.
Final site plan recorded
Recorded.
and all of that, I understand that. That makes
Right,
sense. Why
right.
they haven't been done before, I don't know. Because there's a lot of as-bills that people can't find.
Right, and the thing is that doesn't, I'm not talking about subdivisions at all. So the
Right.
subdivision part of the code has not changed.
Right, so in the zone change, it's the same thing. Conceptually, go for the zone change, and then if there's a project, then bring in the site plan and approval later on, as opposed to before, and the special use is the same way. Commissioner Luke asked, can you just do a zone change without a site plan? The answer is yes, because that's the only way you should be able to do one. Okay.
Right. Here we want to have a general idea of what you're thinking about, what the architectural or design standards will be, kind of generally how you're going to lay things out, but so that they can get a feel for the density and kind of the
Right.
general layout, but not to the point where you're actually having to have engineered stamp plans.
If you're doing an annexation, you normally go to the lowest zone, and then you have to apply for a zone change to get it to where you want. That's the old style. When you do an annexation, you go to the lowest zone in the book, and you have, so simultaneously with doing annexation, you do a zone change to get it to where you want it to be, correct?
Well, right now, we're saying the annexated land, if it hasn't been zoned, is unzoned, is how we're doing it.
So if you're annexing land into town, it comes in with a no zone on it?
That's currently how we're doing it. We're not defaulting it to agricultural.
So then the applicant has to go through, can you do a simultaneously annexation and zone creation or zone change?
Yes.
And can you do an annexation and a zone change and a PUD? I'm going to ask.
Yes.
And take it all the way to town council without a site plan, conditional approval on then.
Well, it's a conceptual site.
Conceptual site plan, and then you come, okay, I just want to understand, because.
Yeah, yeah. This is the idea. Now, if you guys don't think that this works, let me know, because this is how
It works
I'm
for me.
thinking. The way the current code had it was, remember when things would come to the Planning and Zoning Commission twice? So you had your preliminary hearing, and then you had your final hearing. So there would be more detail with the final hearing, and then it would go to council. But I don't know if you really want council down in the nitty-gritty site plan details. I think that they're more interested in how does it fit into the neighborhood, what are you
Right.
planning?
I think it's
I like that.
Yeah.
Well, prior, you would bring your actually completed site plan for the preliminary hearing, and then if there were no changes, your final was automatic. If there were changes at your preliminary hearing, you'd make the changes, then go back for a final hearing at P&Z to get those approvals. Now we can wait on that until everything else has been approved and then bring in the site plan, which
Yeah,
makes
the
sense to me.
final site plan.
That's a
But
lot
again, this
easier.
is open for discussion. That's why it'd be great if you guys
I think it's a
read
good
it.
idea.
Okay.
Saves Mr. Yarvitz and people like Mr. Yarvitz a lot of work and money. Okay, so I think we're still on a continuance path here. Do we have a motion on the table here?
For case number 2014-16, make a motion to continue it to our next regularly scheduled planning and zoning meeting.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Romero, all those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye, okay. All right, so we have one more subject to discuss. This is a matter from staff, live, work, and residential uses in M1, C1, and C2. Ladies?
This keeps coming up. We keep getting requests, mainly because of what is in existence right now is an awful lot of residential in the C1, C2, and manufacturing zones. There's also there's been some new development under the old planning staff, which assured them that we were going to be doing more mixed-use development in the manufacturing area, that live work would be allowed, but the code never got changed, even though the developer went ahead and built units that are live work. So, because I've gotten so many requests from various people all over, the question has come up, can't you allow by right as a secondary use to primary use being commercial, residential? And so I'm just throwing it out there. I have not, I don't know quite what to do with it.
I'm in favor of it.
Is this like kind of like a warehouse district idea? Is that what you're visualizing, or?
Or business studio, a small retail, and live on the premises. I
Right.
think that's how the old world was built, developed.
Exactly. A lot of the old manufacturing businesses actually had like a caretaker or the owner living on the premises. And that's what you see a lot in Taos, where the zoning may be C1, but you actually have people living there because that kind of historically has always happened.
So in the situation that we have in Taos, we have a lot of commercial structures that people could convert partially residential and then live there? Is that?
Well, actually, in Taos, what we have is a lot of commercial zone land that actually has a lot of residential housing on it.
I mean,
That's
it works.
currently being used right next door to manufacturing.
And it works in reverse too. You can have residential, and you can have some under conditional use permit. You can have a business in residential.
Yeah, but not quite as heavy.
So I think what I've heard from Commissioner Lukes, at least, and I'm gathering some context clues, is we're I think we're all in agreement, well, Commissioner Romero, I don't know about you, but we're all in agreement that it's a good idea to try to figure out a way to allow that more easily. And that's what you want direction on?
Yeah.
There's got to be
You know, when you start
somewhere-
writing, this is not that easy to do.
Yeah, to define it and to put-
Well, you know, and then it's begging the question, it's like, do we have too many zones? Do we actually need to be taking out some of our zones and just consolidating and allowing a little bit more mixed-use zones?
What happens now when, I mean, you said you've had a lot of questions come up. I mean,
What's,
the grandfather then, right? If they're-
well, they're grandfathered in, or you're actually having people come in and getting a conditional use permit in order to sell their land.
Mhm.
Or else they're just doing it without actually having zoning clearance. Or they're claiming they were grandfathered in, but who knows if they really were. So that's what I'm finding. And then you have some people that actually built thinking that it was going to be mixed-use zoning, and now are kind of stuck with residential units in a manufacturing zone.
I'm living in the old Taos animal shelter.
That's why I don't sit very close to him.
But you know, when you start getting the pen to the pen, I mean, the pen to the paper, it's like, how do I write this?
There's got to be some examples of,
I mean,
probably
sure.
thousands of examples,
Well,
right?
so basically, it's, you know, what I'm thinking is allowing live-work.
our property's the same way. I mean, we're
And then
right
it's
off
how
the
you
main road.
define live-work, and maybe allowing that as a accessory use to the primary use being
Mhm.
commercial.
You could ask Mr. Caldwell to find something for you that worked.
He's busy.
No, but the chairman is right. There have to be examples, and probably not too far in the code. Maybe Santa Fe.
I can get examples. I was more interested in kind of what your thoughts are on it.
Well,
Uh,
flavor of it.
Commissioner Patterson.
Yeah, I agree. I think we should include the work in residential uses in those zones. It's
Okay.
been a long time overdue, and a lot of people have built under the impression that we were heading in that direction. We've always talked about it, and nobody's done it.
Right.
So I would say, yes, that is something that we'd like to do. And I think your easiest path to do that is just to, is exactly like you stated, to include live work as an allowed use.
Mr.
Mr. Yarovitz,
Just
it's your last comment of the day.
Um,
No, it's,
The commercial zone allows for one residential uses now. A second residential use in the commercial zone is when you have to get a conditional use permit.
Or a residential. The bigger culprit here is the M1 zone.
In the M1 zone, okay. Because I know many years ago, I had to go for a special use permit for Mr. Cunningham, who wanted to build a second home on his property that was zoned commercial well after they had already owned it. And that was an issue that nobody could resolve, but we finally found, mercy on the court, figure out a way to do this. The, in the Draperville that you're referring to, the live work, that was actually done in the county and then annexed into town as live work. Otherwise, it would not have been approved as such. And also, I think, Commissioner Patterson, you mentioned that the only way to do a live work is through a PUD, which is allowed. Was that you who told me that, or maybe that was Commissioner Pollard from a previous thing that says you can do a live work if you do it as a PUD. The goal here, though, I think makes sense, is to allow the old style where I live above, 4 apartment units above my grocery store on the main floor, which is what we don't allow right now of any waste. And but the issue you have is M1 zoning, which doesn't allow any residential uses at all. So what you're really looking at is the difference between Euclidean and smart code zoning, really. Smart
it's a
code
group-
Or we can just add live work as.
is defined. Well, but that's where council was heading when Matthew Foster was trying to drop the smart code. Basically, smart code says, we don't care what you do behind the walls as long as it looks good and you can walk around. Euclidean says, don't you dare mix commercial and residential. That's pretty much all that means from.
I think it's great for use of properties.
I think it's a great direction.
Yeah.
You can do that after we finish these 3.
Yeah,
that-
I'm not going to start that right away.
so you have enough direction, Ms. Perkins?
Yes, I do.
Okay. All right, I guess we're on to adjournment. Do we have a motion? to
I make
adjourn?
that motion for sure.
Commissioner Lutz, we have a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
14 minutes early, Doug.